Hey, I'm Chris Januszewski, and welcome to the Rebellious Times Podcast, the supply chain and logistics edition. And today we have Elisha Tropper, founder of Cambridge Security Seals. Welcome, Elisha.
Nice to be here.
Thanks so much for joining. Where are you joining from today?
New York, Westchester, where I
Nice.
live.
Okay. Do you still have freeze up there, or is it kind of warmed up
It's
a little?
warmed up. We're in the 20s now, but we're expecting it to go back down to near zero tomorrow. So, it's a nice respite from that.
Okay, fair enough. And for viewers out there, obviously, it depends when you watch this episode. We're on February the 5th today. So, Elisha, you're a very experienced entrepreneur. I'm really excited to have you on the show. You've been in business over 30 years as an entrepreneur and an investor. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, kind of how you got started, building to the point where you founded Cambridge Security Seals.
Okay. Well, I was an English major in college, not really sure which direction I wanted to go. I thought about going to law school, came pretty close actually, and but then decided I wanted to pursue something in business. I have very strong family roots in business. My grandfather started a business in the 1940s that today has several thousand employees across several continents. Um, I was briefly involved with that company for a little while. I went back to school to get an MBA at Columbia in New York. Uh, After that, did what was expected, became a management consultant for a little while, worked at Strategy Consulting Group from Price Waterhouse's in New York office. And then I began kind of like my entrepreneurial journey. Didn't actually start a company, bought a company, a company that was in very bad shape uh, called Prestige Label in North Carolina. Spent about 10 years turning that company around, building it up. Sold the business in 2006, really unexpectedly. A very large customer of ours liked the business, wanted to add it on to their business, came in with the proverbial name your price, uh, named the price, and that was fine. And sold the business. Went back into consulting, doing M&A advisory for a little while. Then Lehman Brothers and the collapse of the markets in 2008 just kind of put a whole uh, slowdown or stop to all M&A activity, especially in the mid-market uh, mid-market category that I was focused on. So I ended up going back and taking a job with my family's business, one of the divisions, Cambridge Resources, which was having some issues because of the downturn in the economy. Um, and then I noticed along the way that one of the product lines that Cambridge was distributing was security seals. And Security Seals was a product I thought was pretty recession resistant in a lot of ways. And yet there was a consolidation going on in North America of all the North American security seal manufacturing companies, led by a Chinese owned private equity firm. And they were consolidating the company, shutting down the plants, moving everything to China. And I thought, this is as much a service business as it is a product business. And with my manufacturing background, especially in automation and digitization, I felt that we could produce this product here in the U.S. at a very attractive cost compared to what it would cost to import the product from China. Um, and we could provide far superior service. And I left Cambridge Resources. I bought out the security seals business from them, and I started a security seals business, outside of New York called Cambridge Security Seals. Built a manufacturing plant and began producing seals and marketing to the North American security seals buying community.
Fantastic.
Um,
So you grew up in an entrepreneurial background. You got visibility and exposure to big business and the runnings of a business, and then obviously you got a great education, management consulting, and then set about solving a problem, identifying an opportunity. Um, in terms of security seals as a product, so this isn't something the average Joe on the street will generally think about, right? We know products, get loaded into a container onto a truck, and then they end up at a destination, they get unloaded. And, when we think about the business, we think about the products that are being moved and the business model and how much, somebody's buying for them wholesale and selling it, right? We don't necessarily get insights into the um, minuscule operations, let's say. Um, Tell us about a security seal. What's the significance of a security seal to the point where it's so important to a customer that you've identified value that you can charge for and build a business from?
Okay. So, I mean, the idea of a security seal goes back thousands of years because it used to be a wax seal that someone would send an envelope or a letter to someone. They would fold it over. They would, have hot wax in it and they'd have a ring or some kind of unique seal to them. They would seal it. And if it arrived with the seal intact, people knew that the integrity of the letter hadn't been read or whatever was in there hadn't been disturbed. That really hasn't changed much in a few thousand years. A security seal simply says that if it arrives intact, that means that the contents of whatever the seal is sealing, the integrity is confirmed, and there hasn't been anyone who has interfered or done anything, whether that's theft or tampering or anything like that, with what's inside of it. Um, and that's what a security seal is. Now, today, that takes the form of plastic, metal, electronic. There are lots of different variations to it as far as it, but the basic idea behind a security seal is tamper evidence. It provides tamper evidence to make sure that products arrive and are in the state that they were shipped in. It also confirms, and this, if you've watched the movie, the Netflix movie, The Irishman, this is how Robert De Niro's character got his start in crime by manipulating security seals so that he could steal the products and then claim, "Hey, the security seal is intact, not my problem." Um, there's a theft deterrence to it when when it's applied appropriately and when there's a process that works. There's also a track and trace element to it where each security seal has a unique identifying something, whether it's an alphanumeric number, a barcode, a QR code, something like that, whether it's visible, not visible, whatever it is, there's something unique about each seal. So every seal that's out there can't be duplicated. And uh, it prevents someone from removing a seal and putting on a different seal. And then it arrives and it looks like it's intact, but then you check the seal and you realize that it's not. So there's a track and trace element to that because those numbers enable you also to track what goes where uh, based on the uniqueness of the numbers.
Wow,
Um,
fascinating. What sort of industries benefit the most from your solution?
It's incredible, and we work in more than 30 verticals, everything from food and beverage and freight and logistics to pharma, oil and gas, elections, air travel. It's great, just about anything because anything that has to protect the integrity of anything. On airlines, it's protecting the food that comes from the caterer to the airplane. It's sealed by the caterer, and that way we know nothing's happened to it along the way until it's served to the passengers. Um, when there's cash transferred, you seal a cash bag that's then going to the bank. It arrives at the bank. The bank knows whatever that no one's taken it out along the way. These are just you know a dairy tanker. It's filled with milk at the source. It goes to the processor. Each aperture where the milk goes in is sealed so that no one's tampered with it. Um, so just about anything that moves from point A to point B benefits from having a security seal to ensure its integrity.
Fantastic. It sounds like a solution that would be perfect to implement a blockchain technology to manage it. Do you work with blockchain right now?
There is blockchain technology involved in some cases. One of the issues that security seals, or one of the benefits of security seals to a lot of organizations, is um, its existence sometimes outside the scope of every other process that they're doing. So it's not subject to a lot of the requirements and things like that within the company. So you mentioned before, it's like a simple element. It's something very, very low end that has tremendous advantages. It's treated almost like number two pencils in some companies. It's just a product that's ordered and utilized. Yet, by keeping it in a lot of cases, some companies, it's the security department that handles it. Some companies, it's the warehousing department. Some companies, it's logistics. Some companies, it's supply chain. Like, it depends on how a company decides to utilize security seals. So it certainly can be blockchain. It certainly can be used as part of an overall bigger plan of track and trace. But in a lot of cases, it's specifically not. It's specifically kept to simply a security item that follows a process and a procedure.
I see. Wow, fascinating stuff. I love learning about new elements of business. So you have visibility into how products are moving, or how companies are moving products, and volumes, or the number of trips they're doing, where they're going to and from, right? What are you seeing out there from an economic perspective?
Um, for years, I've noticed that the volume that we see in seals ordering, um, as a mid-sized company in America, in North America, we see seals ordering as a leading indicator of which way the economy is going. When seals purchases go up, that means that people are moving more products and companies are moving more products. That means the economy generally is on the upswing. When the seal orders start declining, then we say, hey, you know what? Things aren't going so well. People, people aren't moving as many products around. So uh, I think that the movement of products in general and using security seals purchases as an indicator of what the volume of products being moved is a fairly good way of ascertaining what's happening in the economy.
Okay. And what are you seeing?
The last 6 months, we've seen a surge in ordering of security seals in volume, and that to me indicates that the economy is growing and it's doing well, and people have confidence that they're able to that it's growing. Um, and I think that that's, if you tune out the noise of everything else, because, kind of like if you look at anytime you turn on the news, whether it's, right leaning or left leaning, whatever it is, everyone's got an agenda when they're reporting news or something like that. It's not so much news anymore as it is opinion. But if you just go by data and say, okay, how much product is moving around the country? How much product is being imported? How much product is being exported? How much? That's data, and that tells you a lot what you need to know. And I feel very, very good about the economy right now.
Well, that's positive to hear. Fantastic. What about the tariffs, the tariff situation? That's something that often comes up in these conversations.
I think it was an overwrought issue. Um, I think the tariffs were, uh, if you think about from the reverse, I mean, the U.S. has always been tariffed on its exports going into all these other countries. So the idea that, oh, it's going to upset our economy totally if we start tariffing imports, I don't think ever was a reality. And I think that what happened shows that that reality was those fears were overwrought. Um, but in the long run, I think the tariffs were simply negotiating tools to get companies to onshore production, as well as drive better trade deals. And I think they've been fairly effective in that. Um, the one issue that people and companies have had with the tariffs has been kind of like the manic depressive attitude of that. Like today they're 20%, tomorrow they're 35%. Oh, we said something wrong. It's 60%. Now it's not the 30%. And what people don't understand is that you order something today and you're going to bring it in and the tariff is 25%, that's not when the tariff gets applied. The tariff gets applied when it lands here. So when it comes through customs here, you may have ordered it at 20% and it lands at 60%, right? And all of a sudden you face a higher cost. But similarly, you may have ordered it at 50 or 60% and then it lands and it's only 10% or 15%. So it works that way. So I think there was a lot of confusion from a lot of companies, and especially as you got down, like people got further and further away from the actual importing and exporting of products as to what the tariffs really meant. In terms of being passed along to consumers, I'll tell you from my observations a few things. One is a lot of the producers overseas recognized that their business was in jeopardy, and they, in some way, shape, or form, covered part of the cost of the tariffs. Um, a lot of the middlemen along the way, everyone kind of took a little piece of the tariffs along the way. So by the time it reached the customer, there really wasn't that much of an impact in pricing, in price increases. I think it was kind of split all the way up the supply chain. And the longer the supply chain, the less of an impact there was on customers. Um, that's
Interesting. I actually got hit myself with a tariff, so I wasn't ready for this. So I ordered. My favorite sports team is Liverpool Football Club, so I'm a football soccer fan since I'm in the US. And it was my son's first birthday this week, and so I thought I'd order him a Liverpool shirt with his name on the back. And so I went to Liverpool website. I selected my location as being USA, so I thought that means it will ship from the USA, but it didn't. It shipped from the UK. So I think for the shirt and shorts it was $80. But then I got a note from UPS saying I've got to pay another $40 in tariffs, and so yeah, I got kind of smacked with this. I wasn't ready for it. My mistake for not seeing where the product came from. But yeah, the costs to import from the UK, I kind of felt that on a personal level. So obviously businesses will need to be flexible and need to keep their eye on exactly how these things are changing, because it can make a huge difference to your margins to, you know, be impacted by a unforeseen tariff or a change that all of a sudden, you've got to decide whether or not you leave these products at the dock or you bring them in or what you do with them.
I think long term there'll be I think there'll be it'll seek a certain level and then it'll kind of stay on a permanent level. I think that's the long term view. But I think the days of the Marshall Plan are long over, where the U.S. kind of subsidizes Europe and the rest of the world. Post war. I mean, that's really where this all started. It was the ability. Let's get these economies going in Europe, and let's keep outside. Let's reduce imports by putting up these tariffs, and they just basically just stayed. And that's just, we've kind of got used to it, and the world got used to it. So until the need now in the U.S., there was a need for it to recalibrate. There was a defense need. There was an economic need to basically build up the manufacturing base and the supply chain in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a different world now. And the US dollar dominance across the world, and the kind of agreement with other countries to support them in response to everybody supporting the dollar being the dominant currency is, it looks like there are some changes to that and the global order, you might say. Um, and I think we're in a world where people are starting to look at what the US sends overseas when we've got 38 trillion in debt and saying, hang on a minute, there are problems here as well that we need to sort. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the next few years play out in terms of that global order. I know they had yesterday a huge rare earth minerals um, a meeting of, I think it was 50 countries, right? And so there are challenges around logistics and it's almost like this new Cold War for minerals and tech production, right? With China taking their position, we've got a silver issue right now. China is one of the dominant producers of silver. I think the US is realizing, oops, maybe we need to lock down some supply there. So it's an interesting world we're in right now. I think even this next year is going to see a lot of change.
Yeah, and I don't think you get to progress by hiding from these facts. I think that what's good now is let's pull the veil back. Let's understand what the issues are. Um, I personally think that the way out of a lot of these issues is by turning it over to the private sector and letting the market and supply and demand do its thing. Ultimately, the less government intervention and interference in the markets, I think, is better. But I think sometimes that only works if everyone's doing that. When you have China that does not allow the free market to work, where they're subsidizing and controlling and really have the finger on the scale for everything that goes on, it's very, very difficult to then say on our side, oh, well, we're still going to work with this free market democratic environment and try and compete when it's just not going to it's just not an effective way to go about things. So I think that the government is right in highlighting that difference and saying, hey, we need a level playing field here.
Yeah, absolutely. So aside from being a successful entrepreneur, and building out Cambridge security seals, you're also an investor as well. Tell us a little bit about your philosophy and kind of how you approach investing.
So I invest really kind of two ways. One is value added investing, which is I look for opportunities to invest where I can bring value besides simply a check to the table. Where it might be in an area that I know, it might be a technology that I'm familiar with, it might be a market that I'm familiar with, there might be contacts or network that I have that can be of aid to the organization that I'm investing in. That I call that, just to myself, value added investing. I think a lot of people do that. It's nothing particularly unique, but it enables me to focus on the areas that I know well, and can contribute. And I can understand more easily the business that I'm investing in as a result and make smarter decisions about what to invest and how I can help. The second part of the investing is basically piggybacking the on the expertise of others. And that's where you would invest alongside investors who know what they're doing, whether it's in real estate or in tech or whatever the industry is. And that could be as an angel investor or something, writing checks alongside people who know, or just investing through a fund. Of and I'm very willing to pay the fund fees for that expertise, because that's really what you're doing. You're paying a percentage point or two in order to get that kind of expertise that you don't have, but you've spotted but what you think is an opportunity, you just don't know how to take advantage of that. That's what you're paying a fund for, and I'm all for that. I think that's a great setup, and that's a great model.
Love it. Fantastic. So we've covered a lot. We've covered a lot of ground here. I'd love to kind of close out with getting your perspective on advice for other founders that are in this kind of industrial and I hesitate to say, but boring businesses, right? Not flashy business, but businesses that, are solid.
Um, well, a couple of things. First of all, when you found a business, okay, know that in most cases you're going to struggle for a while, and there are going to be things you can't possibly anticipate what's going to come and face you. I've never yet, in fact, probably has never existed, the business plan that was developed to found a business, and then what actually happened. They never ever are the same. Okay, you're pivoting 10 minutes after a business plan is written. It's already obsolete because you've already begun pivoting on something. So I think that you have to understand as a founder that you plan, you have goals, you're targeting something, but you've got to be really, really flexible and nimble and put kind of like all pride on the shelf. Just get to where you're going. Um, in terms of boring businesses, the definition to me of a boring business is a business that doesn't produce money. If you produce profit and you have cash flow and you're producing money, there's nothing boring about that.
That's
And
exciting. Yeah.
it's exciting. So I don't care how boring a business is. If it is producing profit, it's a great business and it's an exciting business. So um, I think if people focused on that and said, "Hey, you know what? I used the example before, and I don't, with apologies to Ticonderoga and everything else. If producing number two pencils is a wonderfully profitable business, it's an exciting business. You know, it may not be the most exciting product out there, but the business is exciting." And I think there are a lot of opportunities in boring product businesses that turn into exciting companies.
Love it. Fantastic, Alicia. If somebody wants to get hold of you, if somebody wants to look up your businesses, where should they go?
Well, for seals, cambridgeseals.com is our company, and we're still a growing company. Very, we're growing pretty rapidly, and we're servicing more and more industries. So if they're interested about security seals, then certainly cambridgeseals.com. And best way to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn, Elisha Tropper. I don't hide myself on LinkedIn. I welcome people who want to connect and have something to share, and that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Very good. Thanks a lot.